I used to believe my relationship was everything I needed. We had been together for 7 years and married for 3. On the surface, everything looked good. We shared goals, built routines, had our inside jokes, and lived in a calm sort of companionship people often mistake for lasting love. It looked solid, at least that's what I kept telling myself. But over time, something started to fade. Somewhere between grocery store runs and tired good nights, the connection we had slowly loosened. He didn't look at me the way he used to. Sure, he kissed me. But those kisses felt more like a habit than something filled with passion. They didn't spark anything, they just marked the end of another day. I kept telling myself that maybe this was just what long-term love looked like. Maybe this was normal, but deep down, I missed feeling desired. I missed feeling like someone truly saw me. That's when everything started to shift, slowly, quietly. It began with a new gym membership. I thought a little routine change might help shake things up. That's where I first noticed him. He didn't come across as the flirty or showy type. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. There was just something steady about him, confident, grounded, comfortable in his own skin. He wasn't loud, but he stood out. And I noticed. At first, I just watched from a distance without much thought. I was curious, not intentional. But then, one day, he caught me looking. He didn't say anything, just gave a small smile and a quick nod. But somehow, it felt like a whole conversation. There was an energy in that moment. Something warm, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. A slow burn under the skin. My heart raced in a way I had forgotten it could. It was weeks before we actually spoke. One afternoon, he was next to me adjusting weights. I made a light joke about how I clearly wasn't lifting enough. He laughed, not one of those quick, polite chuckles, but a deep, honest laugh that stuck in the air for a second longer than it needed to. Something shifted right then. After that, we started talking casually. Little things, work, workouts, life in the city. But whenever we spoke, the space around us felt charged. The air itself felt different. I would leave those conversations feeling lighter, more alive. And without realizing it, I started putting more effort into how I looked before heading to the gym. Nothing too obvious, but enough to feel like I was reclaiming a part of myself. I knew he noticed. Back home, things felt even more distant. My husband barely looked up from his phone when I walked in. We still had dinner together, still talked about work, still watched our shows. But it all felt routine, like we were performing the roles of a couple we used to be. Everything felt rehearsed. I tried bringing it up once, casually suggesting that maybe we were in a rut. He just shrugged it off, said we were tired, said this was just life. And maybe he was right. But part of me wondered, if this was life, why did it feel so empty? And maybe he was right. Maybe this was just life. But no matter how many times I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had gone quiet. A part of me felt invisible. And once that thought took hold, it was hard to ignore, especially when I kept thinking about him. The guy at the gym. One evening, just as I was getting ready to leave, I saw him near the lockers. He said he was heading to the same cafe I liked and asked if I wanted to join him. I paused, told myself it was just coffee. Nothing more. So I said yes. We sat outside, the city humming softly around us. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I remembered what it felt like to matter. He asked questions and actually listened, really listened, like I was the only thing in the world worth hearing. He laughed at the right moments, not out of politeness but because he meant it. I couldn't even remember the last time someone looked at me like that. He didn't touch me, didn't flirt, but when we stood up to leave, he leaned in just a little and said, "You've got this energy, like you've forgotten how powerful you are." I didn't know what to say. That line hit somewhere deep. It wasn't just a compliment, it felt like someone reaching inside and turning the lights back on. That night, the words kept replaying in my head. Something had lit up in me again, and I couldn't pretend I didn't feel it. After that, I started going to the gym more. Not because I was suddenly into fitness, but because I needed to see him. It wasn't about the way he looked. It was the way he saw me. Like I was someone rare. Someone worth noticing. At home, everything stayed the same. My husband asked about my day, kissed my cheek, and went right back to his phone. I gave the right answers, smiled in all the right places, and played the role I was supposed to. But inside, I was drifting. I already had. He started timing his workouts to match mine. We never talked about it, but we both knew. We exchanged glances between reps, shared quick smirks across the room. Once, we shared a water bottle, our fingers brushing just long enough to mean something. My heart skipped in a way it hadn't in years. That night, I lay awake next to my husband, skin still humming from a touch that didn't belong to him. Then the messages started. At first, they were about the gym, harmless, routine. But then they shifted. You looked powerful today. Didn't know someone could make sweat look that good. I could have stopped it right there. I should have, but I didn't. I waited for those messages. Reread them when I was alone. I responded slower than I wanted to, pretending I was still in control. But the truth was, I had already crossed the line. He asked me to dinner. Not coffee this time, not casual, dinner that meant something. I said no, at first. Then almost immediately messaged back that I'd changed my mind. I went through my closet and pulled out a black top I hadn't worn in years, the one that once made me feel bold, magnetic. When he saw me that night, his eyes didn't hide anything. His eyes stayed on me, and something in his jaw tightened, not out of politeness but something deeper. It wasn't just admiration, it was hunger, a heat that sat between us, thick and unspoken. Dinner flowed into drinks without us realizing. We didn't bring up my husband. We didn't talk about boundaries, or lines we shouldn't cross. Instead, we talked about music, about childhood, about the people we used to be before life turned us into versions of ourselves we barely recognized. At one point, he asked me something simple, but heavy. When was the last time you really felt desired? I didn't answer. He didn't push. But somewhere between the clinking of glasses and the silence beneath the conversation, his hand found mine. I wasn't even sure what song was playing anymore. I didn't move away. Outside, under the dim light of the evening, he leaned in. I told myself I'd say goodnight. That I'd draw the line right here. But I didn't move. His lips brushed mine, soft at first, like a question. Then something deeper took over, and I answered without speaking. I kissed him back, harder, needier. Years of silence, of being overlooked, of numbing myself just to get through each day, it all broke loose in that kiss. And I let him, because in that moment, I wanted to be wanted. When he finally pulled away, he didn't say a word. He just looked at me with a quiet kind of certainty, no apology, no hesitation. I didn't say anything either. I got into my car and just sat there, trembling. My phone lit up. A message from my husband, asking if I could grab some milk on the way home. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned the engine on. A week went by before I saw him again. We didn't say much, just exchanged a long look across the gym floor, but everything had already changed. I was still going through the motions of my life, but I wasn't really there. Part of me had already stepped out of it and was standing on the edge of something new, something dangerous, maybe, but alive. I wasn't sure I had the strength or even the desire to pull back. It happened on a Thursday. No plan, no warning, just a moment that stretched too far until it snapped. I had made some excuse about working late and ended up at his place. I told myself we just needed to talk. That I would clear the air, stop whatever this was becoming. I even rehearsed what I'd say while sitting in the car outside his apartment. But the second I saw him, every word I'd prepared vanished. He didn't speak, neither did I. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it buzzed. Like we both knew exactly what this was. Every step closer felt charged. Every look felt heavier. My heart pounded in my chest, too fast to feel like anything resembling control. He moved toward me slowly, giving me room to change my mind. I didn't. The first touch burned. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't soft. It was real. It wasn't rushed. Every movement he made was intentional, as if he already knew my body better than I did. His lips moved with purpose, not urgency, like he had all the time in the world to rediscover the parts of me I'd long since buried. My body answered before my mind had time to catch up. All the guilt, the hesitation, the what-ifs, they disappeared in the warmth of his touch and the ache that had lived quietly under my skin for years. Everything felt sharper, my senses lit up like someone had flipped a switch. I wasn't thinking about consequences. Not my husband, not the fallout, just the way he looked at me, the way his hands moved like he was learning me 1 inch at a time. My clothes slid to the floor and I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. My breath caught somewhere between anticipation and surrender. I was shaking, but not from fear, from something else. Something I hadn't let myself feel in so long. There was a version of me hidden beneath the routine, the quiet, the marriage. A woman who had once been wild, wanted, and unapologetically alive. And in that moment, she came back to life. When I saw him fully, I stopped breathing for a second. Not just because of how he looked, though that alone stole the words from my throat. It was the way he stood in that room, like he belonged in it, like he belonged to the moment and maybe, somehow, to me. The line he once whispered returned to my mind, about my forgotten power, and it echoed differently now. His body was more than I'd expected. But this wasn't just about size or appearance. It was the way he filled the space. The energy, the pull. We didn't rush. Every touch, every kiss was a slow unraveling. He was careful, attentive, but never unsure. There was no fumbling, no awkward pauses. Only heat, and tension, and the slow, sweet unraveling of control. He watched my every reaction, adjusting with a quiet confidence that made it feel like I was the only woman in the world. It wasn't just physical. It felt like he was digging into parts of me I hadn't touched in years, parts one didn't know were still waiting to be found. Time became a blur. Hours passed like minutes. I only noticed the sky had gone dark when I caught a glimpse of the window. We lay there, our bodies spent but our minds still wrapped around the silence. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. His fingers traced slow, invisible paths along my shoulder. Outside, traffic hummed in the distance, but in that room, it felt like the world had gone still. I didn't feel guilt right away. Just an unfamiliar calm, like something inside me had finally let go after holding on too tight for too long. For once, I wasn't performing. I wasn't pretending. I was just there. Real, unfiltered. Eventually, I got dressed. Slowly, carefully, like I was still suspended between two lives. He didn't ask what came next. And I didn't offer anything. There were no promises, no goodbye, just the weight of something unspoken hanging in the quiet between us. I hadn't made any promises. There was no need. Whatever existed before that night had already shifted. I was different, even if I wasn't ready to say it out loud. On the drive home, the strange calm that had wrapped around me started to unravel. Guilt didn't come like a tidal wave, it drifted in slowly, like a fog. Soft, quiet, but it soaked into everything. When I walked through the door, he was half asleep on the couch, blanket tangled around his legs. He looked up, blinked, smiled faintly, and asked if I was okay. I nodded. Nothing more. No explanations. Just a silent exchange between a wife and a husband who no longer looked at each other quite the same. I spent longer than usual in the shower that night, hoping the water might scrub away what I couldn't admit. But the memory clung to me. His scent, the weight of him, the way he said my name like he meant it. I stared at my reflection afterward, studying the woman in the mirror. She looked familiar, but something about her had changed. I wasn't sure I recognized her anymore. I'd crossed a line, and there was no pretending I hadn't. The days that followed weren't dramatic. There were no tears, no shouting matches. Just silence. A quiet that didn't bring peace, only weight. I moved through the routine like always. I woke beside my husband. Made coffee. Answered messages. Smiled when people expected it. But inside, something was different. The air between us felt heavier, like it carried a secret we both sensed but neither of us dared to name. His touch startled me now, even in the smallest ways. A hand on my shoulder. A kiss goodnight. Things that once felt natural suddenly made me tense. I tried to push it down, to act normal. He didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and just didn't want to look too closely. Maybe denial was easier for both of us. I kept waiting for a breakdown, for guilt to slam into me and take me under. But it never came the way I expected. Instead, there was a strange, split feeling inside me. Part of me felt ashamed. The other part, free. And that was the part one didn't know what to do with. For once, I had done something for myself. Something reckless, something selfish, but also something that reminded me I was still alive. Still wanted, still a woman, not just a role. It didn't excuse the betrayal. But it made it harder to label it as just a mistake. It was more complicated than that. I didn't know if I regretted the affair itself, or just regretted the fact that a piece of me had needed it so desperately. He never asked questions. Not once. He didn't mention the silence, the shift, the way my eyes lingered in places they never used to. Maybe he thought it was just another one of those quiet stretches that married people fall into. Maybe he didn't want to ask, afraid of what I might say. Sometimes I'd watch him, eating dinner, brushing his teeth, scrolling endlessly through his phone, and wonder if I'd ever really known him. Or if we had both just built this life on routines and mutual expectations, hoping it would be enough. The affair hadn't caused the distance. It had only revealed it. I didn't see the other man right away after that night. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Not yet. He texted once. Thinking about you, it read. I stared at the screen for a long time and didn't respond. Not because I didn't want to. I wanted to with every nerve in my body. But I was afraid of what would happen if I opened that door again. The memory of that night lived in me like a ghost. It didn't knock. It didn't wait. It simply arrived, again and again, uninvited, unstoppable. Every glance, every touch, every inhale of breath seared into place. But it wasn't the sex that haunted me. It was the way he made me feel. Wanted. One evening, my husband surprised me. He suggested a weekend away. Somewhere quiet, just us. He said we'd been distant lately, disconnected. That maybe we needed to escape the noise. I smiled. I nodded. But my stomach twisted. It felt like too little, too late. Like trying to bandage a wound that had already festered too long beneath the surface. I wanted to want it. I wanted to believe we could fix things. That some part of the old us could still be revived. But something had broken, not just between him and me, but inside of me. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for longer than usual. Staring at myself. Same face, same skin, same shape, but the eyes were different now. There was something behind them, awareness. Not quite power, but clarity, of what I'd done, of what I was capable of. I wasn't proud, but I wasn't fully ashamed, either. I never told him. Maybe that makes me a coward. Or maybe it makes me cruel. I don't know, but I understood one thing with piercing certainty. If I ever confessed, it wouldn't be for him. It would be for me, a selfish sort of cleansing I hadn't earned. So I carried it in silence. A choice that lasted only seconds in the making but rippled across everything. Some nights, even now, I still feel it. The ache, the heat, the gravity, not for him, but for the version of myself he woke up. The woman who didn't ask permission to feel alive. The one who didn't shrink or apologize. The one who remembered desire not as a memory, but as a right. And sometimes I wonder, will I ever be able to silence her again? Infidelity isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper in the dark. A glance, a feeling of being seen again. This story wasn't about justification, it was about the quiet unraveling of a woman who hadn't felt alive in years. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing isn't another man, it's the version of ourselves we've buried so deep we forget she ever existed. Thank you for walking this path with me. For holding space for the uncomfortable, the haunting, and the heartbreakingly human. To every reader who stayed until the end, thank you. These stories are not meant to glorify betrayal, but to explore the complex, often messy truths that live behind closed doors. Your engagement, empathy, and reflections keep these stories alive. Disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction and is intended for mature audiences. It explores sensitive themes such as infidelity, emotional neglect, and self-discovery. Viewer discretion is advised. The content does not promote or condone betrayal in any form. It is meant to reflect emotional truths and spark conversation.